Behind the rhythmic thumping of Nazi boots lay a far more bizarre foundation built on occultism, pseudoscience, and the hunt for mythical superweapons. Was the Third Reich a political machine, or a cultish death machine, obsessed with a past that never existed? Today we descend into the dark labyrinths and blood-soaked vaults to find the truth. The genesis of the Third Reich is often portrayed by mainstream historians as a purely political and economic phenomenon, a logical, albeit extreme, byproduct of the humiliation of the Treaty of Versailles and the crushing hyperinflation of the Weimar Republic. However, beneath the surface of the swastika-laden rallies, the rhythmic thumping of jackboots, and the calculated rhetoric of Joseph Goebbels lay a far more bizarre, irrational, and deeply sinister foundation. A foundation built upon the shifting sands of occultism, pseudo-archaeology, and the delusional myth of a lost super-race. The narrative of how a fringe group of esoteric thinkers obsessed with the legend of Atlantis, the world ice theory, and the perceived purity of Aryan blood managed to seize the levers of a modern, highly industrialized state remains one of the most chilling and confounding chapters of the 20th century. These men, Hitler, Himmler, Hess, and Rosenberg, did not merely seek territorial expansion or economic dominance. They sought a total spiritual and biological revolution, fueled by the distorted and often contradictory teachings of secret societies like the Thule Society and the Vril Society. They believed that by tapping into ancient, forgotten Vril energies and purging the world of untermenschen or inferior elements, they could restore a mythical golden age where a godlike race ruled supreme. This transition from flickering candlelight seances in Munich backrooms and the publication of crackpot pamphlets to the systematic mobilization of a nation's entire resource base for a war of annihilation represents a terrifying convergence of irrational mysticism and highly rationalized industrial murder. It serves as a stark historical warning that when a technologically advanced society trades its moral compass for a manufactured myth, the resulting vacuum is inevitably filled by monsters who believe they are performing a divine or biological duty. The ideology was not a secondary factor, it was the primary driver that transformed a modern democracy into a cultish death machine, obsessed with rediscovering a past that never existed to justify a future that would eventually lead to global catastrophe and the destruction of millions of lives. Before we dive deeper into the dark secrets, the subterranean fortresses, and the looted billions, at the absolute heart of this dark spiritual empire stood Heinrich Himmler, the Reichsfuhrer, SS, a man whose outward appearance as a mild-mannered, bespectacled schoolteacher or chicken farmer belied a fanatical, almost pathological devotion to the occult and the ancestral inheritance of the German people. Himmler was not content with the SS being merely a paramilitary force or a security apparatus. He envisioned it as a modern-day knighthood, an elite biological and spiritual vanguard modeled after a twisted, Taish interpretation of the Teutonic Knights and the organizational structure of the Jesuits. His obsession with creating a secular religion based on Germanic paganism led him to Wurzburg Castle, a 17th-century triangular fortress in Westphalia, which he transformed into the Vatican of the SS. Here, in the shadowy halls of what he considered the Mittelpunkt der Welt, or the center of the world, Himmler and his inner circle of 12 Obergruppenführers engaged in rituals that bordered on the deranged. He allegedly believed himself to be the literal reincarnation of Henry the Fowler, the 10th century German. And he sought to commune with the spirits of the Germanic past through meditation and ritualistic ceremonies. The castle's north tower was the epicenter of this madness, featuring a general's hall with a massive dark green mosaic of the black sun Schwarz Sonne set into the marble floor, a symbol of occult power and the perceived energy of the Aryan race. Below this hall was a circular crypt with 12 stone pedestals, where the ashes of SS leaders were intended to be kept, and where a flame of eternal life was meant to burn. This wasn't just theatrical window dressing for a political movement. It was the institutionalization of black magic and esoteric philosophy at the highest levels of a European government. Policy, strategy, and even the timing of military operations were often dictated not just by logistical necessity or military intelligence, but by the perceived whispers of ancient ancestors, the interpretation of runes, and the alignment of the stars in a cosmos that Himmler believed was governed by the clash of ice and fire. If you find these investigations fascinating, please like this video, subscribe, and share with fellow history enthusiasts. Your support allows us to continue producing research documentaries, ensuring these stories are never forgotten or erased from our collective memory. The sheer audacity and resource-draining nature of Nazi pseudoscience was perhaps best exemplified by the Ahnenerbe, a research institute established by Himmler in 1935 to provide scientific backing for the theories of Aryan supremacy and to prove that Germans were the descendants of a primordial race of gods. While the German Wehrmacht was locked in a life-and-death struggle on the freezing blood-soaked plains of the Soviet Union and the scorching desolate sands of North Africa, the Ahnenerbe was dispatching elaborate expeditions to the furthest, most inaccessible corners of the globe. Their missions were not designed to secure strategic resources like oil, rubber, or iron, or instead, they were sent to find the Holy Grail, the Spear of Destiny, and the entrance to the mythical underground kingdom of Agartha in the Himalayas. One of the most famous and well-documented of these missions was the 1938 to 1939 expedition to Tibet, led by the naturalist Ernst Schaefer. While ostensibly a scientific survey, the expedition carried a dark undercurrent. They sought to find the origins of the Aryan race among the high mountain peaks, conducting gruesome and dehumanizing racial examinations on the local Tibetan population, using calipers to measure skull shapes and facial features. Himmler was convinced that ancient Aryans had once ruled the world with advanced, perhaps even supernatural technology, and that rediscovering these artifacts or ancient wisdom would grant the Third Reich divine mandate and supernatural invincibility on the battlefield. The Ahnenerbe grew into a massive bureaucracy, employing hundreds of scholars, archaeologists, and occultists who spent millions of Reichsmarks on projects like searching for the legendary city of Atlantis or trying to prove the world ice theory, which posited that most of the universe was made of ice. This massive diversion of precious manpower, funding, and logistical support toward the pursuit of mythological relics and crackpot science, even as their frontline soldiers lacked basic supplies, winter clothing, and ammunition, highlights the profound and pathological level of delusion that permeated the Nazi high command. In their minds, the line between reality and the mythic world of Wagnerian opera had long since vanished, replaced by a fever dream where the supernatural was considered a valid instrument of statecraft. Beyond the esoteric search for mystical artifacts and ancestral origins, the Nazi regime engaged in the most systematic, bureaucratically organized, and large-scale theft of cultural property in the history of human civilization. This was not the random, chaotic looting typically associated with advancing or retreating soldiers. It was a state-sanctioned, highly professional operation designed to strip the entire European continent of its very soul and cultural heritage. Organizations like the ERR, Einsatzstab, Reichsleiter, Rosenberg, headed by the party's chief ideologue Alfred Rosenberg, moved through occupied territories with specialized teams of art historians, librarians, and archivists. They followed closely behind the advancing front lines, armed with detailed lists of private and public collections. They treated the cultural wealth of France, Poland, the Netherlands, Belgium, and the Soviet Union as if they were simple groceries, to be cleared from a supermarket shelf, meticulously recording every stolen item in massive ledgers that masked the brutality of the theft with the cold administrative efficiency of a modern logistics company. To the Nazi elite, art was both a symbol of supreme prestige and a massive financial hedge against the future. Hermann Göring, the commander-in-chief of the Luftwaffe and a man of insatiable avarice, used his position to amass a private collection at his Caron estate that rivaled the great museums of the world. He traveled in private trains to occupied Paris, visiting the G.A. de Pau Museum to personally handpick masterpieces works by Rubens, Rembrandt, and Vermeer, often buying them through forced sales at a fraction of their value or outright confiscation from Jewish families who were being deported to death camps. This cultural genocide aimed to erase the historical identity of conquered nations, ensuring that the only beauty, history, and narrative that remained would be that which the master race deemed worthy of survival, while simultaneously enriching the hierarchy of the Reich with the spoils of a continent. The financial architecture of the Third Reich, and its ability to sustain a global war for 6 years, was built upon a foundation of systematic depravity and moral corruption that defies modern comprehension. As the Holocaust reached its industrialized horrific peak through Operation Reinhard, the Nazi state didn't just murder millions. It harvested them as if they were a biological resource. In the death camps of Belzec, Sobibor, and Treblinka, specialized units of prisoners were forced to participate in the utilization of the victims' remains. This included the collection of wedding rings, watches, spectacles, and even the extraction of gold fillings and teeth from the corpses before they were cremated. This blood gold was then meticulously cleaned, weighed, and sent in heavy crates to the Reichsbank in Berlin. Under the direction of Emil Pohl, the gold was melted down into standard bullion bars and stamped with the eagle and swastika. To convert this stolen wealth into usable foreign currency, the Nazis used a complex network of laundering through neutral countries, most notably Switzerland. These bullion bars, often containing the traces of thousands of individual tragedies, were traded for the essential raw materials needed to keep the tanks rolling and the planes flying: tungsten from Portugal, chrome from Turkey, and oil from various sources. The scale of this horrific wealth is staggering. Billions of dollars in today's currency were literally squeezed from the most intimate possessions of millions of murdered innocents. Even today, the legacy of this looted wealth continues to haunt the international banking system. With ongoing investigations into dormant accounts and the Nazi gold that may still be circulating within the global economy, it is a financial ghost that refuses to be exorcised, representing a dark capital that funded the most evil regime in history, and whose origins are rooted in the ashes of the crematoria. Perhaps the most poignant and enduring symbol of this lost cultural heritage and the mystery of Nazi looting is the Amber Room. It's often described by art historians as the eighth wonder of the world. Originally an 18th century chamber made of 6 tons of exquisitely carved amber, panels backed with gold leaf and adorned with mirrors and precious stones, it was a masterpiece of Baroque art gifted by the King of Prussia to Peter the Great of the Russian Empire. For over 2 centuries, it stood as the pride of the Catherine Palace near St. Petersburg. However, during the German invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, German troops dismantled the room in a matter of 36 hours, packed the fragile panels into 27 massive crates, and shipped them to the city of Königsberg in East Prussia. The room was briefly reassembled and put on display at Königsberg Castle, but as the tide of the war turned and the Red Army closed in during the final desperate months of 1945, the Amber Room vanished without a trace. Its fate remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of modern archaeology and history. Some researchers believe the crates were destroyed during the intense Allied firebombing of Königsberg. Others suspect they were loaded onto the ill-fated refugee ship Wilhelm Gustloff, which was sunk by a Soviet submarine, or perhaps buried in a deep, booby-trapped secret bunker in the Harz Mountains or the Thuringian Forest. The search for the Amber Room has claimed lives, ruined reputations, and exhausted personal fortunes for decades, leaving behind a haunting trail of mystery and death that serves as a permanent reminder of the beauty that was swallowed by the darkness of the Nazi era. It is a treasure that might now be nothing more than charred dust at the bottom of a crater, or perhaps it still waits in a forgotten, lightless cellar for a discovery, and may never come a silent witness to a vanished empire. As the Allied air campaign began to systematically devastate German industrial centers and cities, the Nazi leadership embarked on a massive, frantic, and megalomaniacal construction project known as Project Riese, the giant in the Owl Mountains of Lower Silesia. This was not a single bunker, but a sprawling, interconnected complex of 7 massive underground facilities, carved deep into the solid, gneiss rock using the forced labor of thousands of concentration camp prisoners, many of whom were transferred from Gross Rosen and worked to death in atrocious conditions. The scale of Riese is truly mind-boggling and speaks to a regime that had retreated into a subterranean world of concrete and steel. Millions of tons of concrete were poured into tunnels that stretched for miles, featuring massive halls with ceilings up to 15 meters high and intricate state-of-the-art ventilation and communication systems. To this day, the true ultimate purpose of Project Riese remains a subject of intense academic and conspiratorial debate. Was it intended to be a final, secure, bomb-proof headquarters for Adolf Hitler and the high command of the Wehrmacht? Was it a series of underground armament factories designed to produce jet engines and rockets far beneath the reach of Allied bombers? Or was it something even more secretive, a site for the development of the rumored Wunderwaffen, or wonder weapons, such as the mysterious Die Glocke, the bell which some fringe theorists claim was an experiment in anti-gravity or nuclear physics? The Nazis destroyed nearly all the blueprints and documents related to the project before the site was captured by the Soviet Union, leaving behind a silent, concrete labyrinth that feels more like a tomb than a military base, a monument to a desperate, dying regime that sought to hide its secrets and its leaders in the very bowels of the earth, while its surface empire crumbled into ash and ruin. The legend of the Nazi gold train has captured the world's imagination and fueled media frenzies like few other stories of lost treasure. According to long-standing local lore in the region of Lower Silesia, as the Soviet Union's forces swept across Poland in early 1945, a heavily armored train laden with 300 tons of gold jewels, precious artwork, and top-secret industrial blueprints departed from the city of Breslau and headed toward the mountains. The story goes that the train entered a hidden, camouflage tunnel system near the town of Walberzik, specifically near the 65th kilometer of the railway line, and never emerged on the other side. For decades, the story was dismissed as a myth by many historians, yet it persisted among treasure hunters and local residents who spoke of sealed tunnels and missing tracks. In 2015, interest reached a fever pitch globally when two men, a Pole and a German, claimed to have located the train using ground-penetrating radar. The Polish government initially expressed 99% certainty that the train existed, and the military was called in to secure the site and conduct professional scans, while subsequent extensive excavations by a team of experts failed to produce a physical train or any crates of gold. The fervor surrounding the search revealed how deeply the idea of hidden Nazi billions is embedded in our collective consciousness. Whether the train is a physical reality hidden behind a collapsed tunnel wall or a psychological ghost born from the chaos, trauma, and uncertainty of the war's end, it represents the persistent, almost desperate belief that the Third Reich's stolen wealth didn't just disappear or get spent. It was merely hidden, waiting for the one person with the right map or the right technology to turn the key and reveal the truth. In the final chaotic and apocalyptic months of early 1945, as the Soviet Union tightened its steel grip on Berlin from the east and the Western Allies crossed the Rhine in the west, the Nazi leadership initiated Operation Fireland and other frantic last-ditch efforts to secure the future of the National Socialist cause. Enormous quantities of Reichsmarks, gold reserves, foreign currency, and bearer bonds were reportedly moved out of the besieged capital and scattered across the rugged, inaccessible terrain of the Bavarian and Austrian Alps. The ultimate goal was the creation of a national redoubt, a mountain fortress where the regime could hold out for a final stand, or more realistically, hide the immense financial resources necessary to fund a future resurgence, a Fourth Reich, or at the very least provide for the escape and comfortable exile of the high-ranking elite. These alpine caches were intended to create a financial ghost that would haunt the world's markets and political systems for a century. Substantial amounts of gold bullion were reportedly buried in remote mountain passes, dropped into the crushing depths of alpine lakes, or hidden in the labyrinthine galleries of salt mines. This strategic dispersal of wealth was not just about personal survival. It was a cold, calculated attempt to ensure that even in the face of total military defeat, the financial influence and ideological seeds of the Nazi elite would persist through a global network of front companies, secret bank accounts, and hidden assets. A shadow economy designed to outlive the men who created it and potentially influence the geopolitical landscape of the post-war world. Decades after the guns of World War II finally fell silent, the hunt for these treasures and the truth behind the Nazi caches continues to be periodically reignited by new tantalizing evidence, such as the mysterious maps provided by dying former Wehrmacht soldiers or SS officers. In several documented instances, veterans on their deathbeds perhaps seeking a form of final confession or wanting to provide for their descendants, have shared hand-drawn sketches and precise coordinates with their families or trusted associates. These accounts often claim that they participated in the middle-of-the-night burial of heavy wooden boxes, crates of documents, or metal canisters in the dense forests of Poland, Germany, or the Czech Republic. One such map recently sent the Polish military and a team of professional treasure hunters back into the field. In a high-profile search for a site where dozens of trucks were allegedly buried in a hidden ravine, these stories often blend verifiable historical fact with the hazy, fragmented memories of war-torn trauma and decades of secrecy. But they highlight the enduring and powerful legacy of the era. Each new lead, no matter how speculative, is a reminder that the greatest theft in history was so vast in scope and so disorganized and desperate at its conclusion that the maps of dying men are often the only remaining guides left to navigate the literal and metaphorical wreckage of the Third Reich's insatiable greed. These quests are more than just simple searches for gold and jewels. They are attempts to close the final, lingering chapters of a story that refuses to be buried or forgotten. Adding a new and controversial layer to the intrigue is the discovery of documents like the Michaelis Diary, an 11-page journal allegedly written by a high-ranking SS officer using the pseudonym Michaelis. This diary, which reportedly spent several decades in the hands of a secret Masonic lodge in the German town of Quedlinburg, a place itself steeped in Nazi occult history, outlines 11 specific locations in Lower Silesia where the SS supposedly hid immense treasures during their retreat. The diary mentions the involvement of a shadowy organization called the Silesian Bridge Foundation and describes caches of gold bullion, jewelry, and religious artifacts stolen from around the world. One of the most prominent sites mentioned is a 60-meter deep well at the Hochberg Palace, which is rumored to contain a staggering 28 tons of gold belonging to the Reichsbank. While many professional historians and skeptics argue that such diaries could be clever modern-day hoaxes designed to profit from the lucrative and sensationalist treasure hunting industry, the level of specific detail regarding SS units' military logistics and geographical features often aligns surprisingly well with declassified historical records. Whether the Michaelis Diary is the final, long-lost key to unlocking the world's largest hidden treasure, or a masterful fabrication, its emergence in the 21st century demonstrates how the potent intersection of secret societies, military history, the imprimal lure of hidden gold continues to fuel a global and enduring obsession with the lost billions of the Nazi regime. When the full force of modern 21st century technology such as LiDAR, multispectral satellite imaging, and high-frequency ground-penetrating radar is applied to the legends of the Owl Mountains and the Sudetenland, the results are often a frustrating and tantalizing mix of revelation and void. Advanced scanners have indeed successfully identified previously unknown man-made underground chambers, collapsed tunnels, and anomalous structural voids that do not appear on any official German or Soviet military maps. These findings prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the scale of Nazi underground construction in the final years of the war was even more vast and complex than previously estimated. However, instead of finding the literal mountains of gold or the wonder weapons promised by the legends, these high-tech searches often find only empty, echoing spaces, vast, cold subterranean halls filled with stagnant water, rotting timber, and heaps of rubble. This profound discrepancy between the massive life-consuming effort expended by the Nazis to build these secure hideouts and the lack of physical contents found within them suggests two distinct possibilities. Either the treasures were moved again in a series of frantic, undocumented last-minute transfers during the final days of the war, or they remain hidden behind false walls, double-bottomed floors, and complex booby-trapped corridors that our current scanning technology has yet to fully penetrate. The scanners tell us with scientific certainty that the giant is real and that the Earth was hollowed out on a massive scale. But they remain tantalizingly silent on whether the giant's pockets are still full, or if the treasure was spirited away into the shadows of history. The staggering, almost incomprehensible scale of the Nazi looting program was first fully grasped by the Allied High Command and the global public in April 1945, when General Dwight D. Eisenhower visited the Merkers salt mine in Thuringia. What he encountered there was so shocking and so visually overwhelming that it permanently changed the world's understanding of the nature of Nazi greed and the systematic nature of their crimes. Thousands of feet below the surface, in the dry, cool air of the salt galleries, Allied troops discovered an unimaginable hoard. Over 8,000 bars of gold bullion, millions of dollars in U.S. currency, British pounds, French francs, and thousands of meticulously packed crates containing the stolen art of Europe, including priceless works by Manet, Renoir, Raphael, and Rembrandt. But the most horrifying and gut-wrenching discovery was not the gold or the art. It was the suitcases and bins filled with thousands of gold wedding rings, watches, spectacles, and even gold fillings extracted from the mouths of concentration camp victims, the physical manifestation of Operation Reinhard. Eisenhower was so profoundly appalled and disgusted by the sight that he ordered every American soldier in the vicinity who was not actively engaged in combat to visit the mine and the nearby Ohrdruf concentration camp. He wanted them to see for themselves the physical evidence of what they were fighting against, so that no one in the future could claim that these atrocities were mere propaganda. Merkers was just one of hundreds of such repositories scattered across the Reich, proving that the Nazi state had transformed the entire geography of Central Europe into a giant subterranean pawnshop and warehouse where the cultural and personal wealth of an entire continent was hoarded like the spoils of a barbaric prehistoric tribe. While the dry salt mines of Germany eventually yielded many of their secrets to the Allied monuments, the deep, dark, and frigid lakes of the Austrian Alps, most notably Lake Toplitz, remained deadly and enigmatic traps for those seeking the lost secrets of the Third Reich. Surrounded by sheer cliffs and dense forests, Lake Toplitz was a remote and highly restricted testing site for secret naval weapons and explosives during the war. However, as the end drew near in 1945, local eyewitness reports and later investigations suggested it became a primary dumping ground for the remnants of Operation Bernhard, the largest counterfeiting operation in history, which utilized the skills of Jewish concentration camp prisoners at Sachsenhausen to produce millions of high-quality, virtually indistinguishable British pound notes in an attempt to destabilize and devalue the Allied economy. Divers in the late 1950s and 1960s did indeed recover several crates containing millions of these fake notes, but the lake is also rumored to hold far more significant secrets, including the Reichsbank ledger or a blacklist of secret foreign bank accounts and assets held by the Nazi elite. The search for the Toplitz gold has become part of a dark local folklore, compounded by the fact that several divers have lost their lives in the lake's treacherous log-filled depths, which are characterized by a layer of sunken, interlaced trees that can trap the unwary. The peaceful emerald surface of these alpine lakes masks a deadly and unfinished legacy of counterfeit empires and sunken secrets, where the crushing pressure of the water and the long shadows of the past continue to guard the final, desperate financial maneuvers of a falling regime. Ultimately, the true Nazi treasure is not to be found in the literal piles of gold bars the crates have stolen, old master paintings, the vanished panels of the Amber Room, or the secret numbered bank accounts in neutral jurisdictions. Those are merely the cold, physical artifacts of an unprecedented era of state-sanctioned theft and depravity. The real treasure, and the one that we, as a global society, must guard most fiercely and study most diligently, is the dark, uncomfortable, and essential truth about how easily a modern, highly educated, and technologically advanced nation can descend into the depths of barbarism when its people are fueled by manufactured hatred, biological myths, and unbridled greed. Every gold coin recovered from a salt mine, every hidden tunnel mapped in the Owl Mountains, and every counterfeit note pulled from the depths of Lake Toplitz serves as a physical witness to the ultimate consequences of radicalization, the abandonment of human rights, and the total subversion of the rule of law. We must never allow the adventure or the mystery of the treasure hunt to obscure the fact that this immense wealth was built entirely upon the calculated suffering and the systematic destruction of millions of human beings. To focus only on the glitter of the gold is to risk losing the most valuable lesson that history has to offer, that the greatest loss of the 20th century wasn't the stolen bullion or the vanished art, but the fundamental humanity that was sacrificed on the altar of a murderous ideology. Ensuring that this history is remembered in all its complexity and horror is the only way to truly find what was lost, transforming the dark and bloody legacy of the Third Reich into a permanent, undeniable warning for all future generations to come.